They called him a liar, a fraud, a pretender to a life he never lived. Yet thousands believed him, cheered him, raised money to defend him. In the shadow of Victorian England's rigid class structure and deepening social unrest, one man stood up in a courtroom and swore that he was Sir Roger Tichborne, the long-lost heir to a great English estate. But was he? Or was he Arthur Orton, a butcher's son from Wapping? The answer tore through British society, filling newspapers, dividing families, and challenging what it meant to belong. This is the story of the Tichborne Claimant, one of the most extraordinary trials in British history, and the man at the heart of it who dared to claim an identity no one was sure he ever owned. The saga begins not in a courtroom, but aboard a ship sailing across the South Atlantic. In 1854, Roger Charles Tichborne, heir to the vast Tichborne estates in Hampshire, boarded the Bella, bound for Jamaica. Roger had been traveling in South America, reportedly under pressure from his French mother to settle down and return home. The Bella never reached its destination. The ship was lost at sea. No survivors were ever found. For most families, this would be the tragic end of a young man's story. But for the Tichbornes, it was only the beginning. Roger's mother, Lady Henriette Tichborne, a devout French Catholic and a woman of formidable will, refused to accept her son's death. Convinced he was still alive, she clung to rumors that survivors had reached the shores of Australia. Desperate and resolute, she placed advertisements in newspapers around the world seeking any information about Roger. Years passed. Then, in 1866, a letter arrived in Paris claiming to be from Roger himself, living in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, under the name Thomas Castro. The man writing it said he had suffered memory loss and had taken another name, but now, prompted by the advertisements, he wished to reconnect. Thomas Castro was, in fact, Arthur Orton, or so his many detractors would come to argue. Born in 1834 in London's East End to a ship's victualler, Orton had grown up far from aristocracy. He'd run away to sea in his youth and later found his way to Australia working as a butcher. He was described by many as coarse, ill-educated, and bearing little resemblance to the refined, French-speaking Roger Tichborne. But the letter set off a chain of events that would engulf England. When the man who called himself Roger Tichborne arrived in England in 1866, Lady Henriette met him and, to the astonishment of many, recognized him as her son. Whether this was a mother's blindness or proof of identity remains the subject of debate. She embraced him, supported his claim, and provided financial backing. With her endorsement, the man became the claimant, no longer Thomas Castro, no longer Arthur Orton, but the putative heir to the Tichborne fortune. Lady Henriette's unwavering support lent him credibility, at least for a time. The press was fascinated, the public enthralled. Here was a common man, rough-spoken, stout, unrefined, claiming to be gentry. To many working-class Victorians, he was a symbol of rebellion against a system that held them down. To others, he was an audacious fraud. Either way, his case became a national obsession. But the legitimacy of the claim soon began to crack. After Lady Henriette's death in 1868, the claimant lost his most powerful ally. The Tichborne family refused to acknowledge him. They were scandalized by the idea that this uneducated, heavy-set man could be their long-lost kin. Private investigators were hired, witnesses came forward, questions piled up. How could Roger, who spoke fluent French and had been educated abroad, have forgotten the language? Why did the claimant have no knowledge of key childhood events or family members? Why had he changed so dramatically in both appearance and manner? Moved to court in 1871 with a civil proceeding, Tichborne versus Lushington. The claimant was suing for his inheritance. The trial lasted over a year and became one of the longest civil trials in British history. Hundreds of witnesses were called, evidence poured in, the courtroom was packed, and reports filled the newspapers daily. People lined up to catch a glimpse of the man at the center of it all. Much of the case revolved around memory. Did he remember places, people, events that Roger would have known? Could he answer questions about his education, his youth, his family? His supporters pointed to the inconsistencies as the result of trauma and years of separation. His opponents claimed there were signs of an impostor. A turning point came with handwriting analysis. Letters known to be from the real Roger Tichborne were compared with the claimant's. The discrepancies were stark. While forensic science in the Victorian era was rudimentary, handwriting was considered a key identifier. Several experts testified that the handwriting simply did not match. Then came more personal evidence. Servants and family members who had known Roger intimately were called to testify. Many could not identify the claimant as Roger. Some were even hostile, accusing him outright of fraud. The case collapsed. The civil suit was dismissed, but the legal battle was far from over. The government, perhaps embarrassed by the publicity and audacity of the claimant, decided to prosecute him for perjury. In 1873, the criminal trial of Regina versus Castro began. It would last 188 days and become a legal spectacle of epic proportions. The prosecution's case was relentless. They laid out Arthur Orton's background in painstaking detail, tracing his early life, his time at sea, and his years in Australia. They brought in former acquaintances of Orton who recognized him instantly. They highlighted the inconsistencies in his story, his lack of knowledge, and his crude manners. The defense, in turn, tried to argue that class bias and prejudice were driving the opposition. Was it so impossible, they asked, that an aristocrat might gain weight, lose education, and fall on hard times? Yet the evidence mounted. Witness after witness from the Tichborne family and their circle denied the man's identity. The prosecution introduced physical evidence, tattoos that Orton was said to have had, and Roger would never have tolerated. The jury, swayed by the weight of facts, deliberated. On February 28, 1874, they returned a verdict of guilty. The claimant was declared to be Arthur Orton. He was sentenced to 14 years of penal servitude. And so, Arthur Orton, the butcher's son turned aristocrat turned prisoner, was unmasked. Or was he? For even in defeat he had legions of supporters. Working-class Britons, disillusioned with the establishment, continued to believe in him. Funds were raised for his release. Songs were written in his honor. He became a symbol not just of fraud, but of resistance, however misplaced. After serving 10 years, Orton was released from prison in 1884. He lived out his final years in obscurity, occasionally selling his autograph and lecturing about his case. He died in poverty in 1898, buried in an unmarked grave. In his last statements, he maintained that he was Sir Roger Tichborne. The Tichborne estate, meanwhile, passed to Sir James Tichborne, Roger's cousin, as originally intended. The family tried to move on, but the scandal lingered. The case had exposed more than just one man's ambition. It revealed the fault lines in Victorian society, the deep mistrust between classes, the hunger for justice among the working poor, and the power of media to shape and polarize public opinion. The legacy of the Tichborne Claimant remains enduring. It has inspired books, plays, articles, and even philosophical debates about identity and truth. The question at its heart, can a man become someone else simply by saying so, continues to resonate. Was Arthur Orton a con artist exploiting a grieving mother and a gullible nation? Or was he a tragic figure who came to believe his own fiction, caught in a drama that spun beyond his control? In the end, we may never know. What is clear is that Victorian England, with its rigid social structures and hunger for spectacle, created the perfect stage for a story like this to unfold. And once it began, no one, not the press, not the public, not even the law, could look away. Over a century later, the Tichborne case continues to haunt the legal and moral imagination. It raises uncomfortable questions. How do we prove who we are? Is identity determined by birth, by memory, or by recognition? Can belief alone make something true? In a world increasingly concerned with documentation, proof, and authenticity, the story of the Tichborne Claimant offers a powerful reminder that truth is sometimes as elusive and as contested as the man who dared to claim a name that might never have belonged to him.